the willpower is not just the force that is visible and that we have an ambition towards. It's also so subtle that it's attracting through its magnetism the things that we either deny or desire. Will, as well as willpower, is one of the most complex and misunderstood centers within our energy field. And yet it is at the core of our evolution and the core of our manifestations. So today, I'm going to be explaining the different facets of the willpower so that way we can understand its true esoteric significance, as well as how important it is for our evolution. The reason the will is so complex is because it has different layers to it. And sometimes a teaching will only focus on one of those layers and attribute the whole center to just one of those layers. In Esoterica, there's always three primary aspects that consciousness manifests as in our energy field, even if those teachings don't directly say that those three primary aspects are the primary aspects of consciousness itself. We will know now that it's really referring to the three primary aspects of consciousness. We could look at that as a trinity. So the trinity that gets manifested inside our energy field is through the thinking center, the emotional center, and the moving center. The will can be seen as purely magnetic energy. It is emotions because it is energy in motion. The will is magnetic like the negative charge of a battery. If the mind is the positive charge and the heart is 0 point field, then the will is the negative charge inside our own consciousness. It is not negative energy that is dark, but rather it is the negative charge that can vibrate darkness. In fact, the will must vibrate. It must be free to move. Its most spiritual role is also its least understood role. The will is the receiver. Just like a reciprocal outlet receives a prong, the will receives and moves its emotion and then guides it into actions. The will is the center that is most responsible for the whole process of attraction because it is the magnetizing energy of emotion combined with the actions we take from that charge, which creates our reality. Thus, the will is the third part of the Trinity that we can call the manifest. So for instance, in the Rosicrucian tradition, these three centers are manifested and called the mind, the heart, and the will. Shocking. In Fourth Way work, these are called the intellectual center, the feeling center, and then the moving center. So the will is referred to as the movement or the moving center. In Hermeticism, this is known as the thought center, the emotional center, and the will. And then what I refer to these three aspects of consciousness, this hypostatic trinity, if we want to look at it as a trinity, because that's what it is, it's the primary trinity of consciousness. I look at it as the thinking center, the sentient center, and the willpower. So I see it as sentience because sentience is referring to something larger and more metaphysical than what we call or what we know emotions. It's like the higher aspect of emotions. So I call it sentience because I see it as the unifying force within consciousness. Now, the willpower has different sides to it. And the first layer that we will see and the first layer that the willpower will show up as is our ambition, our drive, and our visibility. So that's typically what I would call the most visible, that's the most understood layer of the will. It's the one that projects us out into the world for us to be visible. And it's what motivates us to go in a specific direction. So that would be drive, ambition. Even having a clear direction is known as will, because the will would be focused at that point. And it needs to be focused in order to go directly into having a goal, an aim, and an ambition. So it's not just having the ability to be visible, it's that drive towards it, which is why it's known as the moving center, because it's going in a direction. So the movement center is more than just being able to go towards a goal. That's just the first layer of the will that we know. It's also called the moving center for a lot other more subtle reasons that we would not be able to see right away and that aren't just apparent right away as soon as we think of will. And this is where the will's true esoteric power comes into play. Because why it's called the moving center, at this point, when we're talking about it in its less visible and its more hidden and subtle body, it's called the moving center because it's the center that culminates the thinking center and the feeling center. It's the culmination. It's the one that is in movement and in action and in vibration because of the intellectual center and the heart center. And what the will is doing as a moving center is not just moving towards the direction of an aim or a goal that we have that we want to manifest. It's actually moving also reality to it. So it's the moving center because it's what is attracting. The will is what attracts reality to us. The will is how we manifest. Or we might think that the heart is what is creating our reality and creating what we attract because it's our feeling and emotional center. But this is such a common mistake that we make, and this is why terms really do come into play now. It's because the willpower in its subtle, more invisible layer that's attracting reality to us is magnetic energy. So the will is magnetic, which means the will is actually the true feeling center, not the heart. That does not mean that the heart doesn't have compassion or emotions, but the heart is even beyond emotions. The heart is, once again, sentience itself, the unifying force itself. And because of that, it's impersonal as well as personal. It's all. But once we start going into individual, unique emotions, individualized, unique character, our own unique purpose, our own unique needs, our own unique wants, our own unique dreams, all of those is the willpower. So the willpower is not just the force that is visible and that we have an ambition towards. It's also so subtle that it's attracting through its magnetism the things that we either deny or desire. So, which is a great combination, by the way, if you want to be in a lot of pain. So what we deny and then what we desire are both what the willpower is attracting into our manifestation. And so what we're seeing in our reality show up are either things that we've denied or things that we are manifesting and desiring. The will is so multifaceted that only one dimension of it can be seen and brought to light through any given aperture of an esoteric tradition. The Fourth Way tradition holds the widest depiction of the will, and it is still not even the full spectrum of the will. For instance, in the Fourth Way tradition, the will is an internal property within us that needs to be exercised through super effort and conscious labor. But the will also corresponds to the moving center, and this center is not just an area within the body. Rather, it is the whole physical body itself. The moving center is our instincts and the instinctual body. Only our instincts are far more than animal intelligence. Beyond the motor functions that this center also coordinates, it performs a far more intimate role to our evolution. This center holds all of the visceral information that makes us an individual. If we don't feel our instincts, we cannot feel our intuition. If we don't sense our instincts, we cannot sense our intuition. Instincts grow into our intuition, and this is the most hidden and obscured part of the will that most teachings cannot perceive. That the will has a very feminine side to it. It is our very raw, visceral, and innate instinctual sense of self. In anthroposophy, the will is the center that our intuition enters through, just as the imagination enters into the thinking center and inspiration enters through the feeling center. So the power entering the will that gives it willpower is intuition. This is why when we lose the will to live, or when our life force feels trapped to the point that it is paralyzed, we also feel so disconnected from our own intuition, as though we are aimless with no clear internal guidance. We become numb or even nihilistic when our willpower is blocked because we cannot receive our own wisdom or creative impulse. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can watch my video, How to Win Your Spiritual Battle, Being versus Non-Being. So once we look at the will from this layer, the more subtle layer, where it's magnetism, it is the magnetic force that is attracting reality to show up in whatever way reality is showing up in our life. If it's the attractor and the attractor field, what is that energy that is being used through the will to attract? What is that magnetic energy? It is all the things we judge. It is wants, it is needs, it is desire. Desire would actually be the perfect word, even more so than feeling. The reason why is because the will is so magnetic, it would need a lot of feeling in order to even project itself into an incarnation. So by the time feelings and wants and wishes and intentions for an experience are at that level of magnetic energy, it would need to almost build up into whatever we're calling desire to even project itself forth into an incarnation. But either way you look at it, and whatever terms you want to call it, it's strong feelings, and not just any sort of feelings, strong feelings of wishes and of intentions. And because of that, that can be a strong magnetic buildup of also things that we suppress and judge. So the willpower is always going to be strong magnetic feeling. It just depends on whatever is suppressed within our willpower or whatever is blocked within our field for our own personal expansion and evolution. So now we see that the willpower isn't just about our personal manifestations from our ego. It's actually about our evolution, and our evolution taking place through the expansion that occurs, and that expansion is occurring through what we're attracting from our will. So the will is deeply a part of our evolution. And that's why the thing that's most hidden and the thing that's most complex and unknown about aligning the will, activating the will, being able to understand the will, is that the will you can just look at as truth. So if we look at the will as being truth, then this center would represent how aware we are. It would represent how much we know ourselves and how much we know our environment, and it would be open. And so truth, being the will, would be very important to our whole energy field, because the will is the center that moves. The will is the center that combines our thinking and our heart center. So we can't move in an honest direction or towards something that we would call purpose or something that we would call fulfillment or whatever it is that we want to manifest if we don't have enough awareness and truth. So if the willpower is clogged, blocked in any way, if we judge it, if we deny it, then it's going to suppress its movement. So what we're going to get instead is we're going to be attracting whatever reality is being attracted to us to clear those blocks in its movement through truth. So the more that we suppress truth, we suppress ourselves, or we're in denial of reality, the more we can't actually get the proper feedback loop. We can't have our moving center inform us of where exactly to move. And that's why one of the largest problems in the world, it doesn't matter if a person's spiritual or if they're not, they're facing a lot of frozen will, or what I call paralyzed will. So when the will gets so blocked because it's so conditioned, that's when we start not even knowing what direction to move in, what brings us any sort of fulfillment. That's when we've lost our own creative force, because the willpower is so creative. The willpower is just magnetic creative energy. Now, many people, when we think of magnetic energy, we're going to be thinking about how I said desire and feeling and think like, oh, that is all karma. That would be true, because the willpower is magnetic energy. So it's going to be attracting to us karma as well. But that shouldn't necessarily always mean something negative. It would just, once again, karma's a feedback loop. So you see here, the moving center is responsible for not just our own evolution, but if it can't bring about that awareness, if it can't expand and therefore evolve, then what we're attracting through that feedback loop is we're magnetizing to us, we're attracting to us the things that are hopefully gonna unblock it, or the things that are hopefully gonna have us release resistance so that we can be more honest, so that we can be more truthful. So that's why the willpower is either responding and attracting what we deny or what we desire, because either way, the willpower has to move. We can't deny that. And a lot of old spiritual paradigms wanted to dissect consciousness from this feeling force, this magnetic force. It was judged against. But now we're learning in this age that it's about integrating. So it's about listening to, embracing, and integrating the will, rather than rejecting it and trying to dissect ourselves away from it. And so the willpower has been judged against, it's been denied, it's been blocked. And because of that, we can look at all of those ways that it's blocked as conditioned. We've been conditioned out of our truth. So the will is truth, and when we're too conditioned out of it, we can't get an honest answer, an honest intuitive hit, an honest impulse or direction for our feedback loop. And that's why the will is so important on so many different layers of our energy field, because it's informing reality, what will be attracted to us, what will be magnetized to us. But it's also how we inform ourselves, because the will is what the information in the will goes to our intuition, goes to our higher centers, and then it's in a feedback loop. So if the willpower and our will is not giving accurate information, accurate data to the higher centers can't lead the will. So you see, that's a feedback loop that all depends on truth. And that is why I am calling the will truth. It's the center of truth. And how we unblock it will be through truth then. And that means in anything. It's not really about larger than life things. It's not even really about the shadow. Those can be deeper layers of the will that a person can uncover. But when I'm talking about truth, take it at the most surface level, because that's how conditioned the will has been. It's been conditioned out of even the most minor, mundane, ordinary truths. So the will is truth, and how we really get in touch back with the willpower is through understanding all of its layers. So right now I covered two primary layers, which was one, the way that it is the direction and the movement towards whatever we wish to become visible at, whatever we wish to experience. And that is done through ambition. That is done through goals. These are the aims we have that we want to achieve. And it's the movement, the directive, and the visibility for those. Now, the second part is the subtle, way more esoteric force of the will, which is feeling. And the subtle side of the will would almost be like a perfect negative of film, of the projected side of the will. So the first layer, if we were to look at the first layer of the will as a strip of film that's inside a darkroom lab, then the negative we're looking at would be the second part of the will. It would be the inverted form of the first part. It would be the flip side of that first picture or of the first projection of the will. It would be like the shadow side of the will. It would be like, oh, the esteem I want from doing that or moving in that direction, or oh, chocolate tastes good, or oh, I want to get monetized for crying. Like whatever the feelings, the raw, visceral feelings that are through the pre-birth even intention for an incarnation. So all of that desire is what would be like the second side of the will. And of course, there's a third side of the will, and this side is deeply shamanic. The third side of the will would at first glance look like discipline, flat out discipline. And this is mainly the part of the will that esoteric traditions will talk about the will from. They mainly are not aware at all either of that second layer that I was just going to town about. But the third part of the will is deeply important for the other parts. And the reason it looks like discipline is because it is. It is flat out discipline, but a magical, magical discipline. Because what it's actually doing is what in the fourth way it would be called super effort. The willpower in this third form of super effort or discipline is cultivated out of raw willing. We've heard the term willing before, right? Like you have to will it. This is what we're talking about now. We're at the layer of the will when we're talking about it as sheer willing something into existence, or the raw psychic power of intent now gets welded. So we could look at this part of the will as welding. Welding, discipline, or willing. And it starts with something very basic, but still will lead to magic. And this part of the will needs to be trained. It needs to be invoked. And so what we see is that this is when people start doing things of a very highly yogic and disciplined nature. And what that's doing is to train and activate this third layer of the will. And what we're training it to do is to be uncomfortable. We're training it to be uncomfortable so that then it can start to develop this spiritual muscle of welding. So training the willpower at this level in order to weld takes focus, concentration, and it takes super efforts. So what are super efforts? They just start with good old-fashioned TLC, and they start with effort. And then you just amplify that effort. So what that means is, let's say you have a stick in your hand, okay? And you train yourself to hold it right here and don't drop it, and hold it for 10 minutes. And your hand will start to probably shake around the 5 to 6 minute mark. I mean, it just depends on the person, but you get what I mean. And you still hold it. And you still hold it even if your hand shakes, even if your whole trap starts trembling, you just keep it there. What you're doing is training and focusing. Just like how muscles grow through working out, what you're doing is training your psychic energy how to be channeled and welded through sheer effort or sheer super effort, which would be this example I'm using, only something far more intense and amplified. Kind of like if you do cold plunges, or if you do some form of holotropic breath work. Something that is a super effort is something that you are taking your energy field, not just into a level of uncomfortableness for the sake of hurting yourself. There's uncomfortableness and then there's hurting yourself. Nothing that I'm talking about today is about hurting yourself, and that's never good for you. I'm talking about uncomfortableness to train your energy field and to train your psychic centers into channeling them into a center point. Because when you channel that energy into a center point, that's the will. And two, That is training your energy field. So this is training our consciousness and training our psychic centers, the intellectual, the heart, the will, to work together, to work in harmony, to be in alignment, and then to focus and channel that energy into an intent. And that's what intent means at a shamanic level. Intent is no different than will when I'm talking about it at this level, because at that point, it's not just discipline. It's not like a mundane force of discipline. At that point, it's super efforts. So the will, when it's being channeled into the large concept known as intent, what we are doing is willing something. We are intending it. And that's with our psychic being all working together, powerfully channeled in one direction. And that's how shamans break through infinity. It's through intent. I hope this has helped you reintegrate your will. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.